Thomas Shelby is the main character in the British TV show Peaky Blinders that aired on BBC and Netflix the summer of 2013. The show is set in the central parts of Birmingham, England, during the aftermath of World War I, and we get to follow this gangster family with short tempers and hidden razor blades in the peaks of their caps on a journey that starts from the bottom of society and aims towards the very top. As most of you might find out, there are many interesting standout characters in the show. But today we're going to take a closer look at the calm and fierce Thomas Shelby and why other people find him so irresistible. My first observation is that Tommy is a person who's capable of creating favorable opportunities for others and himself at the same time. In the very beginning of the show, it's very apparent from the start that Tommy values his personal relationships. Even though we haven't been able to follow each and every relationship he has to date up close, we get the feeling that he's a respected and sought after man who takes care of his people. With his exceptional leadership skills that I presume he developed during the war, he seemed to understand the power of delegation and persuasion.
When I was away fighting, remember? When I learned some things, such as, you strike when your enemy is weak.
He's highly relationship oriented and gives his own people, family or not, an honest chance to prove their loyalty and usefulness, no matter how small or big their contributions may seem. And from his rich military background, I'm sure that no contribution is looked at as insignificant in his mind. Everyone has a role to play. You don't have to look any further than to Arthur, John, and Michael to see what an impact he has had on their lives and how the faith he has placed in them has resulted in riches, prosperity, and a stronger return of loyalty. He's not the only ambitious man around Birmingham either. But the other characters lack the necessary people skills that Tommy seems to possess, along with his ambitious nature. Again and again, we see him use other people's perspectives as a means and a strategy to reach his own goals. Without saying it, he shows that he cares about the other person simply by looking at things through their eyes.
And I'm guessing that's you, because you're looking me up and down like I'm a f***ing tart.
I want to know what you want.
Which makes them feel understood and psychologically drawn to him even more. Thomas recognizes that most people don't care what he thinks until they think that he cares. He's quick to find out what the other person may want or need and offers whatever that is in return of getting what he wants. That's also why people from all walks of life are able to put their differences aside when it comes to dealing with him, as long as they feel like they're benefiting from his schemes in a win-win situation. However, that's not all people. Some leaders have a tendency to be so self-centered in their ambitions to the point that they become blind to good alliances and alienate other people who could have helped them in their own pursuits, which is shown in this next clip.
Police are attacking your bookies and taking your money. Your men can't control them. You need help.
Perhaps we should listen to what Mr. Shelby has to say.
We have connections. We know how they operate. You have muscle. Together we can beat them. Divided, maybe not. I admire you, Mr. Kimber. You started with nothing and built a legitimate business. It would be an honor to work with you, Mr. Kimber.
Nobody works with me. People work for me. Pick it up, key.
Make no mistake, Tommy isn't cool, kind, and calculated all the time either. He's as power-hungry, manipulative, insane, and dirty as the next person, and that is shown briefly in this next clip.
You league boys laughing at my brother. Hey!
Tommy! Tommy!
I asked you a question.
Tommy, come on, it's just a crack. One lad shit a rumor. Yeah, but his mouth was a diddy coy.
Whereas other villains in the show think their own shit doesn't smell, Tommy knows that his does and he's not afraid to own up to it either. A good example is in his next clip when he's about to shake the hand of a butcher.
You've been here 2 months and we've not met before. It's my fault. I've been busy. Thomas Shelby.
My hand has blood.
Oh, mine too. Hey.
I thought that scene was extremely clever and honest at the same time. But one of the attributes that make him so attractive is that he always keeps an eye out for win-win situations that benefits both parties. By making other people winners, he puts himself and his family in positions to be winners too. However, the difficulty in this is that most people have a tendency to offer win-lose deals, like being too entitled to compromise or asking for favors with nothing of value in return that the other person might find useful. This makes the way Tommy acts even more difficult because he has to swallow his pride from time to time and be vulnerable enough to offer to bridge the gap between him and the other party, but at the same time not be so vulnerable that he ends up getting taken advantage over. And it's a fine line between making the counterpart think that they've seen his cards, aka his intention, and actually showing his cards. But he seems to balance that act quite well throughout the show. Any man or woman who thinks that they're leading without anybody actually following them is simply taking a walk. Tommy teaches us that the quickest way to reach goals is to have everybody walking in the same direction, metaphorically speaking. In order to do that, he has to think the opposite of how most people think, and this is where many of us can gain huge insight into his psychology. He recognizes that the human experience is a trait that we all are a part of, even if we recognize it or not. We all trade a part of ourselves, be it in our jobs, our relationships, our hobbies, to get closer to pleasure and further away from pain. He views life as an ongoing market where everything is for sale under the right price at circumstances.
I think I'm a whore.
Everyone's a whore, Bryce. We just sell different parts of ourselves.
My second observation is that Tommy is a person who's comfortable with walking the road less traveled. Even though I just spent the first minutes commending Tommy for his ability to collaborate with other people, there's another side of Tommy that has remained in the shadows. During the World War I, he served his country in France as a tunneler. A tunneler was a volunteer digging treacherous tunnels covertly in order to place enormous amount of explosive beneath enemy lines. It meant digging alone for long periods of hours in the dark, underground, with dangers lurking in every direction. One of those dangers being potentially facing tunnelers from the enemies, forcing him to fight 20 meters underground in a small tunnel with his hands until death. Now, whether he did experience that or not remains to be explained, but what's clear to us observing is that it was a very lonely line of work with enormous risks, just like the occupation future Tommy would eventually choose to pursue for himself. Dark, confusing, and somewhat lonely, which also carries a lot of similarities with Tommy's suggested childhood. Tommy tells a story of how he once bought a pineapple and a top hat with the family's grocery money for the week. When his mother found out about it, she beat him with a frying pan for wasting the money on luxury. His mother would later pass away by committing suicide, and this, along with the dealing with the abandonment of his father, who left him when he was just a boy, has real-life undertones. There is a certain amount of shame a lot of times in kids who come from lower-class families. The shame in recognition that they're not like the other children around them. The sudden realization that you can't have the same food and clothes that other people have. That feeling has a tendency to stay for life. And while Tommy had the benefit of being an intellectually smart kid, growing up in an impoverished working-class area where being a so-called shuns you from society doesn't make it any easier to fit in. The fact that he bought an exotic fruit and a fancy hat shows his yearning for something better at an early age. The Shelby family come from a heritage of being so-called gypsies, and we can see other people often react to them negatively because of the prejudices surrounding it. We see people suggest that they're lazy, take government handouts, are liars, thieves, swindlers. But at a very young age, he seemed to be aware of the class and social divides, admitting to his thoughts of, why can't working class people like us have nice things too? So in order to answer that question, he chose a different path for himself. He chose to set the aim a little bit higher than his predecessors and most working class people around him. And that's an ongoing theme throughout the show. He takes a different outlook on problems and approaches them differently from conventional wisdom. In the end, it paid off, and he managed to finally end up in a position where he would be able to do favors and offer possibilities to people who helped him along the way. The soft-spoken outcast managed to dig himself out of a difficult hole both literally and figuratively, and climb out of the dark spot that society put him and his family in. Brick by brick, person by person, he has gained the trust of the people. He serves as a beacon of light for all the young boys around and sets the example of what is actually possible to achieve in one generation. As he keeps on stacking successes, his influence gets bigger and bigger, and that's one of the reasons he maintains power over the entire city and has such a strong support by the working class people in the Birmingham area. In a sense, they view him as theirs and he sees himself as a part of them. One of the reasons why there are so many memorable moments of Thomas Shelby being so calm and composed is his ability to future pace his thoughts, think and plan ahead of time for himself and for other people.
I think, Arthur. That's what I do. I think. So that you don't have to.
Notice the common theme, other people. Even though Thomas indulged in a lot of destructive habits like smoking and drinking to self-medicate himself from post-traumatic stress disorder and mental illness, his thoughts, concerns, and actions are mostly aimed outside of himself, regardless of how stressful situations are. Now, we shouldn't forget the historical context that we're all watching from throughout the show. The timeline is straight after the devastating World War I, where symptoms of shell shock and post-traumatic stress disorder was largely misunderstood. To get a feeling of how unstudied this type of diagnosis was at the time, we get an idea of its novelty in a scientific sense when Michael tells Tommy to visit a doctor who can remove bad thoughts from his head.
You know, Tom, there are doctors in London now who can talk their way into your head, dig out all the shit. Perhaps you should see one.
It was in fact very early stages. There was also a common mindset that men should be strong and not display or talk about emotions. Any sign of emotional pain was frowned upon as weakness, a mindset that is unfortunately still prevalent in modern society. Surviving the war and earning medals for his bravery in servitude, Thomas developed an acute ability to stay calm through life and death situations. He never overreacts when stressful things happen, which often throws his enemies off. What I learned from observing Tommy is that he assesses all his possibilities ahead of time and reconciles with both the best case and the worst case scenario. And somewhere in between the worst case and the best case scenario, he manages to find peace and comfort that he's ready for whatever comes his way, come hell or high water. And that allows him to start turning the focus outside of himself and think from different perspectives to help his family and friends. The psychology behind Thomas' thinking can help you tremendously in finding peace within yourself and be of use to others both mentally and physically during stressful times. What I have learned is that he plans each day in advance. He operates from a clear to-do list. He clears his mind regularly and aims for the best case scenario while still being prepared to mentally handle the worst case scenario. Even though Thomas uses alcohol and cigarettes to clear his mind, which might not be the healthiest or most sustainable way to do it, you can find something healthier like meditation or going for a run to free up your own mental space. His ability to think, plan, and decide ahead of time is one of his most powerful tools for overcoming fear of the unknown and increasing his productivity. When he becomes free from fear, he instantly becomes more productive. His productivity enhances his attractiveness both as a potential ally and a potential partner. He is seen as more reliable and people want to be around his clarity and confide in his strong energy, and that's exactly what we see men and women do around Tommy. Tommy's own ability to set goals, plan and take action are huge defining factors that change the course of his own life. And for us learning from him, the takeaway from me is that the clearer the vision that we have for ourselves is, the less we have to worry about. There's an old quote that goes, "The beauty in a feminine person is that little bit of masculine, and the beautiful in a masculine person is that little bit of feminine." I can't seem to find the exact quote, and that probably means that I'm misquoting someone out there, but I feel like it applies very well to describing the irresistibleness that women find in Thomas Shelby. It's well known that a lot of women tend to find people who are dangerous or exhibit dangerous traits very attractive, some of them even to the extreme. Over the years, we've got people like Jeffrey Dahmer, Ted Bundy, and Charles Manson who, despite their awful acts of raping, kidnapping, and killing, still are drowning in female attention by women around the world. Perhaps it's because some women believe that there's a wounded child nested somewhere inside the killer that can be healed through a devoted nurturance that only they can provide. Nonetheless, it's not representative of all women, and it isn't the topic at hand today. What's different in Thomas' appeal from serial killers and traditional bad boys is slightly counterintuitive to how a lot of repressed bad boys tend to act. Tommy doesn't talk about his emotions a lot due to him most likely being more introverted and not the talking type in general, but he isn't afraid to put his emotions on display despite his reserved nature. He cares, he feels, he cries, he's scared sometimes, but he's still okay with it and carries on. He's in touch with both his feminine and his masculine energy, but neither of them defines him.
And I'm scared, Grace. I'm scared for you. I'm scared for the baby. And this is how I am when I'm scared. It's unfamiliar to you, but not to me. I can fucking be scared and carry on. And it's not pleasant to look at and no joy to be around. All right? I'm sorry.
In times of fear, he uses courage, which comes across as confidence, which we all know is extremely seductive. Most people wish they could be courageous in times when they're actually feeling scared. How many of us haven't been in a verbal or a physical confrontation with someone where we might have wanted to do or say something, but the fear took a hold of us and we remained paralyzed instead? And then, when that same moment has passed, say, minutes, hours, days, or weeks, we start to conjure up ideas that we wish we would have said or done at that very same moment. There is a lot of speculation and projection in our day and age of what a real alpha male entails. A lot of it is toxic masculinity, where men are encouraged to never show any emotions or to admit to ourselves or others that we are alone, scared, or lost. However, as we all can see in Peaky Blinders, Thomas spends a lot of time being alone, scared, and lost. But he also knows that it is okay to feel emotions as long as you stay on top of them and don't let them control you or paralyze you. There's strength in accepting and then moving on. It shows self-awareness and that you've got courage, confidence, and personal boundaries. Learning from Tommy, we can see that feeling lost or losing a mental battle to our inner demons doesn't define us, as long as we stay on our path with the help of periodic solitude and the help of friends and family. And then, when we've regained our strength, we forget the battle and focus on winning the war instead. Tommy shows us throughout the series that whoever you are today is only a fraction of who you'll be tomorrow or next week and the year after that. Even though he's supposedly dead inside, he shows a lot of character. He's someone who faces his fears and weaknesses upright and knows he will only get better and better with time. And that's a hell of a benefit for a woman who is examining if he's worth spending time with or considering him as a sexual partner. So, to summarize my analysis: 1. Tommy is a master at creating opportunities for others, even those who can't do anything significant for him today. 2. Tommy uses his time, energy, and resources today to create a better tomorrow for himself and for the people around him. 3. He goes for what he wants and is willing to take the road less traveled if he has to. And 4. He doesn't limit himself to his predetermined societal role. If you who's watching this lean more towards the masculine side, tap into your femininity every now and then. If you lean towards the more feminine energy, remind yourself that there's nothing wrong to ruffle some feathers and tap into your masculine energy from time to time. I'm sure I haven't addressed all of what makes Thomas Shelby so incredible and irresistible at the same time, because there's so much to dissect. But I'd like for you guys and girls to comment your thoughts or phrase your own analysis down below, and let's have a discussion about it. Also, if you've seen this show already, don't forget to comment what your favorite moment or quote is. With that being said, if you like this type of videos, be sure to like the video and subscribe. Peace.